Good morning. I wonder if you'd be surprised to know that research indicates that belief in God does not have a measurable positive impact on a person's mental health. But believing in a God who cares has a significant positive effect. But a God who cares about what? Does God only care about our spiritual status, not really being interested in how we are doing physically, socially, emotionally, or mentally, except in terms of how that might impact our spiritual growth? Well, let's look at that. I've reflected on this particular verse in Psalm 35 a lot. The Lord be exalted, who delights in the well-being of his servant. The word well-being in the original Hebrew language is shalom, which means wholeness, completeness, peace. So God delights, God takes pleasure in the well-being of the whole of us, not just parts of us. We were knit together in our mother's womb. So integration, wholeness was God's plan from the beginning. And in Christ, we see this plan reiterated. So, as we continue our journey through the book of Luke, did you notice a month ago when I was sharing with you from Luke chapter 8, how this very concept of God being concerned about our integration, the wholeness of us, was really clear in how Jesus dealt with those two particular case studies we looked at. Remember, we looked at Jairus and his dying daughter, and we looked at the woman with the blood issue. And we saw that Jesus was concerned for their whole well-being, holistic care, multi-dimensional well-being, shalom. As we continue through the book of Luke, exploring the life of Jesus and how that life can shape our lives, I want us to address holistic well-being by contrasting, like I did last month, how it might look to be shaped or misshaped in our desire to become more like Christ. So in today's reading from Luke 12, Jesus addresses key elements of well-being through the lens of relationship. Specifically, what's our relationship with anxiety? Helping us to explore, is anxiety or worry serving as more a friend or a foe in our lives? Our relationship with possessions. Do we own them, or do they own us? And our relationship with the kingdom of God. Do I truly treasure the reign of God, or is my allegiance merely tokenistic? Such hard, confronting questions, but essential to address, honestly, if we are to experience well-being, shalom. Unfortunately today, we only have time to explore the first one, our relationship with worry and anxiety. Does it serve as friend or foe in our lives? So how could worry, how could anxiety possibly serve as a friend in our lives? Is this even possible? To explore that, it's vital we spend some time looking at how we can be misshaped in our understanding of anxiety. So here are some key words that are linked with worry. Now look at this continuum, measuring mental health. From the green zone, wellness, through the amber zone, poor mental health, to the red zone, which represents mental illness. Now just think for a moment, if I said to you, I am experiencing one, some, or all of those words, those anxiety responses, where would you think that places me on that continuum? Our answer to that question is really important because it's going to tell us whether we are being shaped or misshaped towards shalom. So, do you think that good mental health corresponds to the absence of those? That I can only claim I've got mental wellness, I've got good mental health, if I don't experience any of those? And that the presence of those must mean that I've got a mental health problem. Dramatic effect. And that's like a... That's like a drum roll preparing us for the answer. So I want to say really clearly that if we experience any of those anxiety reactions, we do have a problem. It's called the problem of being human. It's part of the human condition to experience those. In fact, I've seen research suggesting that the only people who never experience anxiety are psychopaths. Obviously, the intensity and frequency, the costs and consequences vary widely depending on which zone I'm in, and we'll explore that more in a moment. But everyone experiences worry. So, what do we do with that in light of what we just read, a very strong statement from Jesus? Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. Do not worry. A definitive, imperative statement. Surely this indicates that Jesus wants us to see all worry as a foe, and even more than that, is Jesus actually saying he wants us to see all worry as sinful. If you look on to that verse in Philippians, Paul actually says, and we were drawn to this morning, do not be anxious about anything. Another do not statement. So aren't we being taught by these words that we must strive to eliminate all worry from our lives, because whenever we worry, that is proving that we mustn't be trusting God, that all anxiety is a sign of a lack of faith? Have any of you been exposed to that teaching sometime or other, that worry equals sin? I have. And rather than it shaping me into becoming more Christ-like, all that teaching did was make me feel guilty about my worry, push it down and pretend. Surely the opposite of shalom. And surely that was not what Jesus and Paul intended by those words. So what do we do with this dilemma? It's helpful to look at words in the original language. So when Jesus and Paul said, do not worry, do not be anxious, they both used the same word, merimna. Do not merimna. Merimna has two layers of meaning. Do not allow yourself to become divided or split off. That's one layer, through the way I'm thinking. And the other layer of merimna is do not allow yourself to become so consumed by this worry that it ends up controlling you. You know, that brooding, stewing, churning worry? We've all done that, haven't we? That's the main type of worry we are being warned against encouraged not to go into. That is Merimna. So it's a constant mindset of worry. Merimna is a constant mindset of worry, not the fleeting thought of worry. Now this is important because we're being exhorted to not allow our thoughts to become divided or to become consumed by anxious thoughts, rather than being condemned if we have any worrying thoughts at all. Indeed, it's assumed we are going to have some anxious thoughts. So we read in Psalm 94, "When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul." Consolation, not condemnation, not judgment when I'm anxious. And then in 1 Peter, "Cast all your anxieties on God." Invitation, bring your anxieties to God, rather than, again, rejection or judgment. And do you remember from what Julie shared with us this morning, how does that particular verse from 1 Peter go on? How does it end? Cast all your anxieties on God because He cares for you. He cares for you. Which reinforces what I said before, that believing in a God who cares, especially when we are anxious and worried or depressed, is foundational to our well-being, our shalom. So, we are going to worry. However, we're warned about letting it divide or consume or control us. Do you remember in the parable of the sower, some good seed was choked by worries of this life? That's when worry serves as a foe in our lives. And I can remember times in my life when I allowed the worry to choke me. It became Merimna in my life. So let's get back to that continuum that we looked at before to explore the friend or foe experience of anxiety. Now, if I happen to be in that fortunate position of mainly hanging out in the green zone, when I experience worry, it's because God designed our brains with a threat alert system. And these feelings, these anxious responses, are a friend alerting us to possible danger. So just like a smoke alarm sets off a warning signal when it detects smoke, in the green zone, when my mind sets off these warning signals, I need to pay attention to notice the signal as soon as possible, but then I need to check it out and see if the threat is real or imagined, because a smoke alarm makes just as much noise whether I've burnt the toast or the house is on fire, right? So I need to check the warning signal and see, is this alarm state that I'm going into, is it pointing to a genuine threat or is it imagined? So I need to test reality. What is this anxiety alerting me to? I need to tune in and listen to my worry. Guilt will make me push the worry away. That's why it's really important now we bring it in, we listen to our worry, and ask, what are you telling me? And usually in the green zone, worry is telling me that I'm sensing some threat about some sort of loss. Then I need to ask myself, is this threat real or imagined? If it's real, I need to take some steps to address it. If imagined, I need to use strategies to tame it. We're going to look at naming and taming strategies in just a moment. But now let's look at the amber zone. In the amber zone, a person has become oversensitive to threat. So their smoke alarm is being set off regularly, whether there is a threat or not. Actually, the smoke alarm is tricking me into seeing threats where there mostly aren't any, or to catastrophize, to exaggerate the threats that are there. That is why anxiety, when it's unmanaged, has been called the disease of the imagination. So in the amber zone, my daily functioning and my sleep are now disrupted because the constant alarms have revved up my mind and my body, making me hypervigilant, making me tired and wired at the same time. I can still function in the amber zone, but the wear and tear is taking a great toll. And if I don't address this, I can move quite quickly into the red zone. The red zone is where anxiety has become the norm. Rather than just visiting there sometimes, I live there. It's where it's now crippling me because of that. So this is an anxiety disorder. This is a diagnosable mental illness. And as such, in the red zone, I need professional help. Indeed, most people who have lived with an anxiety disorder for some time inevitably become so battle weary that they consequently become clinically depressed as well. A double red zone burden. So why am I saying all this? I say this because over the years I've known believers who are in the red zone with a diagnosable anxiety disorder who were convinced by false teaching that they should just stop worrying, that they could pray the worry away. They've read those verses in Luke and Philippians and felt suffocating guilt about not being able to just stop worrying. Some people's guilt has then stopped them from seeking and receiving the much-needed professional help. So these verses became misshaped in their life, tragically increasing the burden. Similarly, I've known some believers who happen to be blessed with hanging out in the green zone, who have naively, recklessly told red zone sufferers to just let go and let God. In a one-size-fits-all misinterpretation of how anxiety works. What works in the green zone does not work in the red zone. And I cannot expect someone in the red zone to use green zone strategies. It is not fair. It is misshaped. And by the way, if a person has experienced trauma in their lives, they inevitably start out in the amber red zone. Trauma revs up the system. Some time ago, I was reading Galatians and became really confused by these two verses which appear to be contradictory. So in Galatians 6, in verse 2, it says, carry each other's burdens. But in verse 5, it says, for everyone should carry their own load. That's why it's helpful to go back to the original language. So in the original language, I discovered that the word for load in verse 5 was referring to the typical daily load that we all carry in life. Today's just worries and difficulties. So it's like a backpack. Everyone carry your own backpack. But the word used for burden in verse 2 is the word used for a boulder, a heavy load I can't and I shouldn't manage alone. So if I'm fortunate to be in the green zone, I need to carry my own backpack, taking responsibility for managing my worries, knowing that all the rest of us mugs are trying to carry our backpack too. And I need to be available to help people with their boulders if I'm in the green zone. But if I'm in the amber or the red zone, I need help to carry my enormous boulder of anxiety. And there is no shame in that. Yet, we all know people who expect or even demand help with their backpack, whilst others, through guilt or shame or a distorted sense of self-reliance, refuse to get or receive help with their boulder. Both examples of being misshaped. If I am in the green zone or the early amber zone, there are many naming and taming strategies I can adopt to help me manage my backpack and to be more equipped to handle the boulders of life when they come. So you know how in John 14 Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Do not let your hearts be troubled." And by the way, if you look at the original language, the word that's used is tarazo, which means do not let your mind become so stirred up that it causes inner turmoil. It causes dismay, right? So do not let your mind go to that. When Jesus says do not let your hearts be tarazo, that says to me that Jesus is wanting us to proactively seek shalom. Do not let means maybe we can have a choice. In the green zone, we have a choice to actively, proactively seek shalom. And there are many resources out there that can help me be shaped towards shalom to help me manage my backpack and my boulders. For example, many believers find it helpful to develop spiritual disciplines like these. They'll find one particular saying and they'll repeat it like a mantra when they notice worry starting to rise inside them. I can meditate on words like this. This is bad, but you are good. Some people find it really helpful to repeat that over and over. It's acknowledging this is bad. It's not dismissing it. No spiritual bypassing happening here. I'm acknowledging it's bad, but reminding myself that you are good. Some people find it helpful to say, it's this, but it's only this. I find that one really helpful for me because when I lose perspective, when I start worrying, and have you heard that saying, worry gives a small thing a big shadow? So when I worry, I give this small thing this big shadow, and it's really helpful for me to meditate on these words. Yes, it is this, but it's only this. Or to remind myself, this will pass. Or when I breathe in, I acknowledge I can't. And when I breathe out, but you can. I wonder if there might be one particular phrase up there or another one you know that would be really helpful to use as a spiritual discipline when you notice in the green zone worry. And in the amber zone, if you are receiving some help, in the red zone particularly if you're receiving some help, to start practicing these. Some people find it helpful when they're worried to journal because the very act of writing externalizes what's going round and round in here, and 10 to 20 minutes of writing about it can get it out there and can be really helpful, especially if in my journaling I'm asking myself this question. So rather than just ruminating, going around in circles, I'm actually asking myself a specific question. Is this a boulder or a backpack that I'm worrying about right now? And if it is a boulder, who can help me? As I said, there are a lot of resources out there to help us. Jesus wants us to proactively seek shalom. So, to conclude our exploration of anxiety, friend or foe, I want us to return to these words from Jesus that we read earlier. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not merimna,
about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. I want us to imagine, to picture Jesus speaking directly to each of us individually. And I want you to picture Jesus saying, then Jesus said to me, therefore, I tell you, and then he names you, do not Merimna about. What do you think would be the one or two issues in life that you find yourself being hooked into worry by? And if Jesus was inviting you to not Merimna about those, I wonder if you could name in the privacy of your own heart what might those two things be that Jesus is saying, I call you to not fret, to not be consumed by these. And I want you to picture Jesus saying to each of us, for life is more than. I wonder how Jesus would complete that sentence in your case, in my case. What do you sense the Spirit wants you to reprioritise because it claims too much of your attention or perhaps can divide or consume you? How would you complete that sentence? For life is more than. Spirit of the living God, you have been whispering to us, seeking to shape us as image bearers of Christ. Lead us beside still waters and still the storms within our minds. Teach us the way of shalom. Amen.